everybody. Welcome to the Abroaders Travel Podcast, your weekly meetup with thousands of entrepreneurs, hustlers, creators, nomads, ninjas, wanderers, and world changers, all seeking to build the skills and connections to live a life without borders. If you want to learn more about what we do or download our entire podcast archive, check out the website, abroaders.com.
Happy Wednesday morning, and welcome to another episode of the Abroaders Podcast. I'm AJ here in Austin, Texas with Erik, and this week we've got some good stuff, man. We're going to get into the redeeming side of our course. We're going to share some of that information, have some interesting news and updates. And also, this is episode 159, so you can find show notes at abroaders.com/159.
How you liking Austin, man?
Oh, man, it is great. Love Michigan, but I don't love those winters. So it's great, man. We're in a really good setup here. Found a good place to live. Jake, our marketing guy, is down the hall. So, I mean, we've got a streamlined meeting infrastructure. So, so far,
this is kind of like the first time since, I guess, being in the dorms in college that I've really had like a couple of close friends all living in the same building with me. For context here, we're in like northeast Austin, and we found a pretty nice apartment complex that's pretty close to downtown, like maybe 10 minutes or so from downtown, if you don't try and do it at rush hour. And lots of like stuff that the basics are all pretty close. A couple of nice little taco stands. We had a nice authentic taco experience at El Norteño yesterday, which was delicious. And by the way, just a side note on that, you didn't pay with a credit card, did you?
No, I paid with cash.
So I was kind of a jerk and had like zero cash. I have 2 Brazilian reais in my wallet at this point, no US dollars. And so I paid with my Sapphire Reserve card, and I got a survey from Square. Even though I didn't give them my email because Square saved it the last time I did a transaction and asked for a receipt. So it was kind of a guy because I actually got to give the Norteño a nice review on Square. And I would have happily done that if if they'd asked. But that's a really cool feature. Like if you're a small business running transactions, I'm pretty sure your email address is not shared with the merchant, but Square also gives them the ability to respond. There's a little checkbox at the end of the survey that said, allow us to respond. Your email will not be shared with El Norteño or whatever. Cool. Cool.
Also, for the people out there listening, excited to share more of our learnings about Austin. I mean, we've got some good information. Jake went to law school here, so I mean, he's been here for 4 or 5 years in total. I've got some other good friends that have lived here for a while. I've got some friends from Round Rock, which is, 15 minutes north of the city. So in the future, we'll give some reporting on Austin and share some of the hits in our favorite spots.
Also, I would say pretty safely that we are in a spot that's much more likely that some Abroaders podcast listeners might be venturing through than Grand Hatch, Michigan. So if you do happen to be in the area, send us an email, and I'd love to meet up for coffee or drinks or whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
As time permits, it'd be great to connect if you happen to be in Austin.
Yeah. All right, man. You ready to get into the news and updates?
Let's do it.
Okay. First thing we've got here is American Airlines. They're going to change the way they do boarding. So the goal is to have it be a little bit more transparent. For me, man, boarding isn't a big deal, but I acknowledge it's a thing for other people. I mean, you see people getting giddy and antsy and they want to get up there and on the plane. So in the past, you could be a Group 1 boarding person with American Airlines, but there's still some like kind of hidden classes ahead of you that might go. So what they've done is they've broken it down into 9 boarding groups. Wow. So the first one is first class and U.S. military. And then on international flights that have at least 2 classes, you're going to have business class get to board as well there. And then you just kind of go on down the way. So group 2 would be the executive platinum people or one
just
world.
Basically so
it goes through each tier. So, I mean, for anyone that matters to, I mean, that's how it's going to work. First class, U.S. military, you're always going to go first.
If not for the damn overhead bins, I honestly would always want to be the last person on the plane. Unless you're in business or first class and you're like going to get a welcome drink or whatever.
Right.
If it's just cramming into the back with everybody, where's the damn fire? What's the rush? Everybody leaves the runway at the exact same time. People up front slightly before.
I agree with that. The only thing for me is if I'm really tired, I prefer to get on the plane as soon as possible so I can try to get to sleep before takeoff because I can't sleep through a takeoff. So
that's amazing. That's never going to happen for me. Okay, so next up, just a quick one, the Uber and Starwood partnership, which I think we referenced a couple of weeks ago, and they just devalued the points earning. So you still get 2 points for every dollar when you're staying at a Starwood hotel, like the days that you're actually checked in, but it's now 1 point for every $2 otherwise. I don't think it really changes much, but I was even thinking about like, can I find a way to do a Starwood stay early in the year? Because I do use Uber a lot. And now that they've cut the earning rate in half, I'm even less motivated. So I don't know. Maybe they were giving up a lot of money on that, but it seems like kind of a senseless thing to change unless it was costing them a huge amount of money to offer 1 point per dollar.
And maybe Uber is trying to get a little bit more narrow focus with all this legal shit they're dealing with. A lot of distractions, a lot of partnerships, diverting resources. All right, we got a few things with the cards, offers, and benefits. So we've got some stuff with the United cards. There's some targeted offers on 3 of their different cards. The first one is up to 75,000 miles for their Club Explorer card. And this is an interesting thing here because this is a high annual fee card. So it is an annual fee card with a $450 annual fee. So 75,000 United points is really valuable. But personally, I have trouble with really being in love with this offer because number one, you're giving up a roster spot on your 524. You're cutting into that. You're going to pay $450, and the other high annual fee cards, whether it be the City Card Amex or the Chase Sapphire Reserve, I think those benefits are a little bit more universal, and you're not hitching your wagon to one airline. There's a little bit more versatility.
I wouldn't get this card other than for the 75K bonus. It is true. I haven't seen much of a bonus at all on that card.
And so one thing, these are targeted offers. So we got a link in the show notes where I went through kind of the process. So all you have to do is you put in your United account information, and then they reveal if you get the offer or not. And then the other 2 things that are nice is the United Mileage Explorer business and personal card. They've got targeted offers up to 50K. Okay. So those typically hang out at 30K, and one of them has a $50 statement credit, which is nice too. So definitely a good option for the person that doesn't want to have a high annual fee. 50,000 United points is easily a flight to somewhere if you want to mix it up with getting back with other points you have, but a decent deal. But I guess the key takeaways here are it's targeted, so you may not actually be able to even get it, and be conscious of 524 and make sure that you're not using a valuable roster spot that you'd prefer to use for the Southwest card if you want to get the companion pass or the Chase. Yes. So keep that in mind.
Yep. Okay, so next up we have a increased bonus with the Delta Gold SkyMiles card, both business and personal. It's 2,000 spend requirement. They both do also have a $50 statement credit for a purchase with Delta. And, this is just basically the same offer that was around last April. So it was up for a few months during the summer and then went back down for about 5 or 6 months. So it's back up 50,000 Delta miles. I don't think this is an amazing deal. Just Delta's, depending on where you are. If you're in an airport that is a Delta hub like Detroit, it can be more valuable. Delta can be really good for international travel on partners, but it can be challenging. It's more challenging, and because of the way they do their pricing, I'm a little less keen on the Delta points.
Yeah, they're less reliable. Great to have in your back pocket if you're guys like us who are lucky where there's just going to be a never-ending queue of travel. We're always going to be going somewhere in a relatively short time window, and like I use my miles to get down to Brazil because there's a good option. But
I'll say Delta's the first one I check because it's like, if you can use the Delta, use them. Right. Because it's more challenging in terms of when the availability, but it's still good value price-wise if you get the saver level. I guess the only other thing to say about this is the Delta business card, the Amex business card, won't count towards Chase 524. So if you're able to apply as a sole proprietor or get this as a small business card, you can do that, and Chase, at least as of now, won't be counting that application towards your limit.
Okay, let's move things to our little random news section. So we've got some interesting news, some sad news, some good news. But the thing we're going to start with is I read an article on thepointsguy.com about Detroit. And first of all, I'm going to say that I really appreciate the fact that they tried to shine Detroit in a good light. Yeah. And they had nice things to say about Detroit, and a lot of people just love talking shit about Detroit. And the thing is, I've never met anyone that's actually been to Detroit and has had a bad time. I've never met anyone that's been to Detroit and has had anything bad happen to them. People I know that live there have, but like people that visit Detroit, it's usually a good experience. So I'm going to be really brief on this. A couple things, a couple good things and a couple bad things about this article. Number one, they point out Dearborn and the Muslim community there, which is the biggest Muslim community, I think, outside of the Middle East and in North America, the biggest mosque in North America. There is a shitload of culture there. There's a lot of good Middle Eastern and halal food, which is cool. So I'm happy they mentioned that. However, if we're going to nitpick the article a little bit, they just did a quick Google query on like top barbecue, top thing. So like I would say to replace the restaurant that they recommend, I would say for anyone that's in the Detroit area, Selden Standard. It's dominant. It's in Midtown. It's not quite downtown where everyone goes. It's a little bit more residential. Amazing menu, amazing chef, amazing staff, and the thing I would not recommend is Eastern Market. Eastern Market's really cool, but Eastern Market isn't a thing you can do every day. It's a farmer's market on the weekends. It's really contingent on a bunch of things, and I hate it when people say go to Eastern Market when you come to Detroit.
Tuesday,
yeah, exactly. There's not shit there. There's just a few restaurants there. So
one last tip. This is my favorite place that I went when I spent. What's the old timey place that we
Cafe de Mangos?
The Mangos, yes. Okay, so if you want just like an alternate type bar, and there's actually a lot of those in Detroit, so just exploring will yield benefits. But this place looks like it's like straight out of the 1950s or something like that. You know, like the art on the wall. It's cozy but not cramped. I wouldn't say unless it's really packed. And some great drinks
and some
good people.
Very very good live music.
Yes,
some top end.
They bring in the Motown.
And what I love about de Mangos is the proprietor likes to show face and be the mayor. He's around
old too.
He's just out shaking hands, seeing how you're doing. What are you kids up to? You guys having fun? Are the drinks good? Like the type of place that's just a really cool neighborhood bar, and it's kind of in a part of town that's being a little bit overdeveloped. So it's like kind of a cool. I don't know. You can kind of go back in time a little bit at Cafe de Mangos.
Yeah. All right. So let's touch. I wanted to just mention this Air India thing for a second because I thought this was really a strange article. They basically Air India has suspended 57 people for being overweight, and their justification is like, obviously if you're too overweight you probably can't do a good job if there's an emergency, but I've never heard of that being an explicit restriction on being a flight attendant. And I was curious.
Not since we've been alive, but I'm pretty sure back in the day they used to make those ladies hop on scales. Because,
for sexist reasons and like horrible reasons. But I could see, like, I immediately suspected. I know India's culture in a lot of ways is not nearly as progressive as most of the rest of the world towards women. And I'm wondering, I know that the regulation is in fact also applying to men, but it's by BMI. So it's like your body mass.
Women naturally have much higher BMIs. Like the healthy BMI for a woman is
they did have different ones actually. They did actually split that. So it's a little, somebody thought it through a little bit, but anyways, curious. And I'm wondering, it's something maybe to look into of like what the rules are in the US. Obviously, like I'd get concerned if there was like a 300-pound flight attendant that, probably couldn't help if somebody needed help in an emergency. But anyways, interesting. They basically in the same week decided to add women's only seating, which because there were complaints about people being groped and like creepy, horrible things. So I don't know. I've never flown Air India. Don't really have any desire to, but at some point we do have to do that rickshaw run across.
Yeah. So if any Air India, if I see any dudes groping women, I will not be quiet. I will say something. See something, say something. Next thing that I thought was pretty cool is it's a company actually doing a little bit to give back to the people that actually make the shit happen. So American Airlines won a very big award. So ATW named them, I believe, the top airline of 2016. And so what American Airlines did to thank their people is they gave everyone 2 flights, all their employees 2 flights. So I'd imagine there's like some contractors, but American Airlines employees, you got 2 flights. And this is a pretty big deal. And it's pretty interesting. A quick snippet on why they won this award. It's more a combination of service and corporate success and maneuvers than just actually service. So the reason the ATW says they won the award is they managed to invest a lot of money into their product, making it better, over $3 billion. The merger with the U.S. Airways was the biggest merger in aviation history, and it was virtually flawless. It was really smooth, and that they've also brought shareholder returns. So I mean, publicly traded company, they're bringing their investors' money, they're investing in their people. Like they just kind of did it all. And pretty interesting. Look, Etihad won the award last year, Southwest the year before, and Delta before that. But it'd been since 1988 since American had won this award. So pretty big deal. They're excited. So that people get 2 free flights. So that's I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and I know that. So for the most part, employees get standby rights, but that can be a massive pain. Like our good friend Andrew has standby rights from a family member that works with American, and there was one year that we were trying to meet him in Brazil, and it took him like 4 extra days to get there because he was just sitting at the airport.
Go to the airport. Oh, tough luck. All right, go back to a hotel or a buddy's couch. I mean, it's
so that's nice. Good for them.
All right, final notice. We've got a couple more things, but a final notice today. This is the last chance to get 100,000 Amex membership rewards with the Business Platinum card.
Yep. And good card, but I think the one piece of news that's interesting, like the benefit that I like the most out of all of them is the Platinum Centurion lounges that you have access to. Right now, I think there's 6, and they just announced that Philadelphia Airport is going to be getting an Amex Centurion lounge. No opening date yet. They haven't started construction. So if you get the card now, you're probably going to have to keep it for at least a year to be able to, if you're a Philadelphia person. But something to keep in mind might be worthwhile. And 100K Amex points is worth at least $2,000 to $2,500 with not very good redemption skills. And in the next part of the show, we are going to start talking about redemption.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Hopefully we can get that up towards 3,000. Let's do it. Okay, so now we're going to jump into some of the content from the redeeming section of the Broaders Points and Miles course. And remember, this is available for free until the end of January by using the coupon code podcast. And we'll also have a direct link in the show notes that includes that discount. And once you sign up and register for the course, you'll have access forever. And we're going to continue to add valuable information. But this is kind of a summary of the second half of the course. So we talked quite a bit on the last 2 episodes about earning. And here we're going to cover the first parts about redeeming frequent flyer points. Okay, so in the first lesson, we're going to go over the frequent flyer basics. And so this is going to be a review for some folks, but this is really important because this is just sort of the general rules for frequent flyer programs that are associated with airlines. And so unlike the flexible or cashback type points currency like Capital One, these have more restrictions, but they can also be a lot more valuable. And it's fundamental to understanding these programs before you can think about the transferable currencies because those just give you options generally to transfer to lots of these. So a frequent flyer program is usually associated with 1 or more airlines. You can either earn points by flying with the airline or the partner airlines, or by spending money with a rewards credit card that's linked to your frequent flyer account.
Okay, so each one of these programs, they've got their own rules that determine the different ways that you can use or redeem your points. And so the complexity and the diversity and all of these issues is what creates the opportunities to get a big value if you can navigate that. So these programs, they make a lot of money because people typically redeem at much lower of a value than people that care about it or know about it or understand the rules, kind of like us. So that is where actually the trickier the program is, the more opportunity there often is to find some loopholes.
Definitely true. Okay, so the first main thing you have to understand is that these programs have built into the terms and conditions that they can change their prices or rules without notice. And you agree to this just upfront by participating in the program. So whenever you hear us on the podcast talk about devaluations or negative changes to programs, that's what we're talking about. It's essentially, hey, we just unilaterally decided we're going to double the price of this particular reward ticket. And so the point is that you can't stop that from happening, but the best way that you can protect yourself is to use your points when the opportunity presents itself. You don't want to just invest in frequent flyer points and have millions of dollars worth or millions of points and thousands of dollars worth of travel. You want to use them as possible because you want to use the savings over time. Mm-hmm. Eventually, they're going to lose value.
Next thing we're getting to is sharing points, who can travel. So this is something that I think confuses a lot of people. So each traveler, they have their own frequent flyer account. And typically you cannot move around your points. It's not like real money. It's not like I can say, oh, I've got 30,000 American Airlines points, Eric, let me shoot you 20 because you need 20. You can't do that. However, one thing that is nice is typically there's some exceptions to this rule, but generally you can book travel for other people. So if I've got 1 million American Airlines miles and Eric has 0, and he says, hey, give me some miles so I can fly. I can't give him miles, but I can use my miles to book a flight for him. So it's one and the same as far as allowing other people to benefit from the miles you have.
Yeah, and I think the key thing here is, and we're going to talk about later, you have to have enough points for a ticket. So the scenario where I've got like 20,000 American miles and I need 30 for my trip and you've got all the extra miles, you can't just give those to me and I book them. So that's where it can be a little bit more tricky. Next up is points expiration. And that's kind of the cardinal sin of earning points, is letting them expire. And so many programs require you to have some sort of account activity every so often to prevent those points from expiring. It's actually really easy to stop this from happening unless you just don't know it's going to happen, if you lose track of the rules. So usually if you just earn some points, redeem some points, that's going to be enough to reset the expiration date. And there are a few programs that expire points after a certain amount of time regardless. Those are rare and they're all foreign programs. Delta doesn't have expiration. United and American are like 18 to 24 months. And And so Award Wallet's a really good tool to keep track of that stuff, and they'll tell you when your points are going to expire. If you do have a rewards card that earns points, you don't have to worry about it, because all you have to do is buy a latte with your rewards card, and you're going to generate that activity that resets the expiration date back 18 months or whatever the program rules are. And so just to kind of summarize, there's a few different ways. You can buy a small number of points. Usually the minimum's 1,000. That's like $15. Sometimes you can use shopping portals, which is basically just going to one website before you go buy something from Apple or Kohl's or Target online. You just go through a different site, and that site gives you a few points as a thank you, because they earn a commission when you use their link. So that's a way to just get a few points. You can sometimes transfer points in. If you have like United miles, you can transfer in from Chase. One of the easiest ones is to just donate like 100 miles to charity. There's lots of charities that'll take small donations of points, and that'll reset your balance. And then my favorite, of course, is to book an award ticket.
The whole point of the damn thing.
That's the best way.
Before we get deeper into booking award tickets, we should probably explain to people what an award ticket is. All an award ticket is a flight that you book using your points or miles. And if you're reading the blogs or following people on social media, you'll hear it referred to as award tickets. So as far as award tickets go, airlines and programs. So airlines and frequent flyer programs, they're actually separate entities. And so each airline's management makes the decisions on how they're going to manage their award availability, how many seats are available to book with miles, as opposed to making people actually pay with money for them. So when you book an award ticket, the frequent flyer program pays the airline a pre-negotiated price for that seat.
Yeah, and that's something I think, like, in general, you can kind of glaze over that, but it's important with the partner airlines. And sort of like, if you want to book a flight with Air France, for example, and you have Delta Sky Miles, that's perfectly fine because they're partners. And so you can use your Sky Miles and book on Air France or Korean Air or any of the other partner programs or partner airlines that are able to be booked with Delta Sky Miles. And so the key idea here is just that you're going to use your Delta points, and Delta is going to pay Air France, like, say, $100 for your international trip. They're like pre-negotiated, pretty cheap. But it's one of the reasons why you see some restrictions sometimes where, like, Delta can't book first class on Korean because Korean charges way too much money to Delta's program, and they just don't like that, so they don't let their members use it. So that's sort of how you can kind of think about the difference between the program and the airline. So in other words, Delta Sky Miles, the program, can book on Delta Airlines, the airline, and many other partner airlines.
I think one question and one concern a lot of people have about frequent flyer points is restrictions. Oh, when can I book? Blackout dates, because they watch Capital One's advertisement. So as far as when you can book, you typically have got a pretty long runway, typically between 300 days up to a year before departure. So the dates and then the seats that are open to be booked, it depends on the program. So, like, I don't know, give me an example of how this could vary between a couple different programs.
Yeah, so the key thing is, like, the airline opens up their seats. So they file their schedule. And, like, if you look at Google Flights or like a paid mechanism to buy tickets, usually it's about a year out as well. And one thing, just generally, there's no perfect time to book an award ticket because, as you said earlier, the airlines kind of manage the number of seats that are available with points throughout the year. And so any blog that's telling you, like, always book 365 days ahead or always book last minute, like, those are BS for the most part. And the thing to remember about this is just, like, there may be differences in whether you can book a particular flight based on which type of points you're using in terms of whether it's the seats actually loaded into the system. And so just going back to the example I used before, if you want to book a flight from, let's say, JFK to Paris on Air France, so that's the airline, you could do that with lots of different programs that partner with SkyTeam. So Delta Sky Miles is one currency and Air France Flying Blue is another. And those are good ones because they're also really common and easy to acquire. And the key thing here is that Delta, in this case, can book on Air France 331 days out. And Air France's program can only book 305 days out. If you think about that for a second, that actually means that Air France, the airline, is giving people with Delta Sky Miles access to seats before they're giving people with their own points. And that's just, like, one of the weird things that happens because every program sets their own rules and stuff. And so the thing to know is that, like, somewhere between 331 days out and 305 days out, there's generally going to be better availability on Air France with Delta because none of the Air France people have had access to it yet. And so that's just, like, we've got a bunch of resources that are in the course, and there's links to our sort of up-to-date resources on the best information we have about those things, so you can look it up for any particular problem or any flight that you're trying to solve.
Yeah. Speaking of partner airlines, this is another thing that when you're out at a bar, somebody asks what you do, and you explain, frequent flyer points, and people say, well, I've got a bunch of Delta Sky Miles. I work for one thing that I think a lot of people don't understand is the relationship with the partner airlines, or typically with the alliances. There's some partners that are non-alliance, but so most frequent flyer points, if, for example, if I've got American Airlines points, you can obviously use those to fly on an American Airlines flight, but there's also a lot of other options. They've got these partner airlines, so you can use your American Airlines miles with American Airlines to fly in their partner. Yep. So I think that's something a lot of people overlook.
And we're actually, in one of the upcoming lessons, we're going to talk a little bit more about like the details of that. Next up is just having sufficient points. And we touched on this just a little bit earlier when we were saying why it's important to know that you can't share points. Just basically, you need to be able to cover at least a whole one-way flight with the number of points you have. So if you're booking a round trip, it's no problem to say, okay, I got 30,000 Delta miles and 30,000 American. I'll go one way with Delta and the return trip with American. But if you only have 27,000, you can't book that 30,000 point ticket and just pay the difference in cash. And that's really important to know in terms of planning.
Okay, so that is it for us, kind of giving an overview of the program basics. So just to summarize, frequent flyer programs set the rules for how you can use your points. The prices and rules can change without notice. The airlines kind of have you in a little bit of a headlock there. You really should understand the policies about expiration and booking for other people before choosing a program, because there are some exceptions. Maybe if you have a certain type of point, you can't book for your friend. They've got to be listed as, a resident on your address. There's some tricky stuff, so you want to make sure you double check those things. And then plan to earn enough points for the trip you want, because most programs require that you have enough points to book the trip. Having 95, there's no partial credit here. You need at least enough points. You need more than enough points to get it done.
Awesome. Okay, so next up, we're going to just do a quick review and give some better, more concrete examples of how partnerships and alliances work. The main reason for this is actually just that it lowers costs for the airlines. So when they have partnerships, when Delta partners with Air France, the reason the whole thing exists is that, if Air France flies people from France to a big hub airport like JFK or Atlanta, they want to still make it possible for those passengers to get to places like, Detroit or Fresno, California, places that are less big hubs. And so they use Delta as a partner to connect the trip. And for travelers, it's important because with your award tickets, understanding which airlines can have this relationship makes it way easier to get to your destination faster, fewer connections, shorter layovers. So all of that stuff is important of just understanding how this stuff works.
All right, let's get into airline alliances, because this is one of the fundamental parts of partnerships and using your points. So airline alliances, they're a special form of partnership that includes a bunch of airlines. And programs affiliated with an airline that is part of an alliance can generally book flights on those respective airlines. And to break it down, there's three major alliances that are the lion's share of all the flights and all the airlines in the world, and that's SkyTeam, Star Alliance, and the One World Alliance.
All right, so starting with One World, generally, I think One World is probably the best for Latin America and South America, especially, generally speaking, we're going to kind of frame this in coming from the U.S., but because American Airlines dominates compared to United and Delta with South America and the Caribbean, they just have more flights and more award availability. It's probably the best. And they also have LAN and TAM. So TAM's in Brazil and LAN is in Brazil and most of the other countries, actually. They've got a pretty big footprint in South America. So if you know that, South America or the Caribbean is going to be on your list, One World's probably the place to start. The other strength of the One World is probably to the Middle East because they have Royal Jordanian and Qatar Airways. Europe, they have British Airways, which is a big one, and Finnair, and also Air Berlin and Iberia. So if you look at it just kind of in sheer numbers, you would think they were great to Europe. But the problem with One World is that most of the award seats that are actually available are on British Airways, and they have super high fuel surcharges. So they're probably not the ideal one to start with, and they're decent to Asia, but maybe not as good as SkyTeam.
Yeah, so the next one's Star Alliance, and to your point about One World not being the best to Europe, there's some options, but there's a lot of issues with fuel surcharges because of British Airways. Star Alliance is really good to Europe because you've got a lot of airlines servicing that between the United States and Europe, and also they do not pass on the fuel surcharges like British Airways. You don't have the majority of the award availability having $500 or $600 in fuel surcharges per flight. Another thing is Star Alliance is the biggest alliance. There are the most airlines. And finally, An undercover advantage of Star Alliance is the accessibility to Africa via the availability to Europe, because Europe's pretty much a launch pad to Africa. And to complete those, they've got a handful of African airlines. They got Egypt Air, Ethiopian, and I think another one, South African Airlines. So they've got good access to Europe from the United States and between Europe and Africa.
Yeah, definitely agree with all that. And, Star Alliance is just big. 27 airlines. Right. It's got quite a few more than the other ones.
One thing we should mention, I think, too, is American Airlines is the big One World. United is the big American Star Alliance partner, and then now we're getting to SkyTeam.
Delta is the big SkyTeam one. So for SkyTeam, I think that the big asset for SkyTeam is going to be with travel to Asia, and there's a couple of reasons here. So first of all, they've got diversity in Asia. Asia is geographically a big region. They've got 3 airlines in China. So they've got China Southern, China Eastern, and China Airlines, which good luck trying to keep those 3 straight. They also have Korean Air, which is in East Asia, so that's important. And then in Southeast Asia, they have Vietnam Airlines. And so that combination is just sort of helpful if you are looking to go to Asia. A lot of times that's the easiest way to use your Delta miles. And Delta is most likely going to be the program you have, possibly Air France as well. The secondary one, I guess I would say, is that SkyTeam is probably, in general, reasonably easy to go to Europe, just because Delta tends to have a lot of availability to Europe, and Air France is good about their availability. They also have Czech Airlines, which I'm not super familiar. It's a small one. Obviously, they just mostly have flights to the Czech Republic and a few places in the US. But yeah, SkyTeam's a pretty good alliance all around. And just knowing those sort of major differences that we just described will help you, at least if you don't have any points already, to kind of start thinking about where your focus might want to be.
Yeah, exactly. One final thing to bring up is, so the alliances are the majority of the airlines, and that connects almost all the dots. However, there are some airlines that are independent, and they're not in an alliance. So Alaska is a really good example of that. Alaska's got a frequent flyer program that is really popular amongst award travel enthusiasts because they've got really strong partners. They're not in an alliance, but you can use your Alaska miles to head to Asia on Cathay Pacific. You can use your Alaska miles to fly on American Airlines to Europe. There's a lot of things that you can do. And then finally, beyond Alaska being a good example of a program that's not an alliance, programs within the alliance also have partners beyond the alliance. So American Airlines, One World, they've got, the Air Berlin, the British Airways, the people in One World, but they've also got a handful of non-alliance partners, which would be, just to name a few, Alaska, Etihad, Fiji Airways. So the alliances are the bulk of stuff, but there are some interesting plays. And Alaska is a great example because it's a really solid program that gets overlooked because it's not in an alliance.
Yeah, and I would say the one thing, like when we do booking advice, the number one thing that people completely miss are the non-alliance partners because they're just not obvious. And so like somebody that wants to go to Fiji might have no idea that they can use their American miles because Fiji Airways, who has probably 80% of the flights to Fiji, is a partner airline that's not a member of the alliance. So we do in the course have a reference to a list that we keep up to date. It's not the prettiest thing yet, but it's a really good spreadsheet that makes it easy to see. If you just click, I have this type of points, and it tells you all the partners, and we keep that up to date on a weekly basis because we use it for our booking service. So that can be a helpful resource.
All right, to summarize partnerships and alliances, frequent flyer points can be used to book flights with airlines that partner with a particular program. And airline partnerships and alliances, they give you more options for using the points to get to your destination. Quick reminder, if you've got American Airlines points, it doesn't mean you have to fly on American Airlines. You can fly on their partners or alliance partners. And there are 3 major alliances, which would be the Star Alliance, SkyTeam, and One World. Star Alliance is United, SkyTeam is Delta, and One World is American Airlines for the Americans.
Cool. Okay, so moving on to pricing. This is really important. There's actually 2 separate lectures in the course about pricing, and it's one of the most important things because the pricing is where the arbitrage is. So the idea here is that, like, if you have different types of points, if you're well diversified like we recommend you be, you can choose the program that has the most advantageous prices. So in other words, a flight from New York City to Barcelona, Spain could have very different number of points required depending on which type of program you use. And I should say that this is actually a really detailed lecture that we're just going to kind of go over at a high level on this. So if you're interested in kind of how this was going to work for you, you should certainly check it out in the course because it's like a 10 to 12 minute lecture in the first section and even more possibly in the second. So to generalize here, we've got 3 different frameworks that the programs use. So there's region-based pricing, which groups countries into a region. So Europe's a region, North America might be a region, or the US might be its own region. And they just charge a fixed price for travel between. So 30,000 points from the US to Europe, 50,000 points from the US to Australia, that type of thing. And regardless of which direction you travel, with any given program, it's going to be the same price. Now, the second type is distance-based pricing, and that's based on the number of miles that you actually fly. And so the price could either be calculated by the total distance or one segment at a time. And so the difference is subtle, but it can make a difference depending on whether you're required to make a lot of stops on the way to your destination. And there's a really good tool called Great Circle Mapper, gcmap.com, that lets you just see how far it is on your itinerary. So that's the second way. And that's the biggest one where there's a trade-off, where if you are comparing and you have the option of using a distance priced program and a region priced program, you definitely want to look at both before you kind of commit, because there's lots of situations where American's region based and British Airways is distance based, and they have a huge overlap in partners because they're both in one world. And so that arbitrage, if you can get both types of points, you might be able to pay $20,000 instead of $35,000 for a trip. So that's where it matters. The last one is price based, and that sounds redundant almost, but the pricing based on price just means that whatever they're charging for the ticket, they're going to base the number of points you need on that. So Southwest is a really good example of a program that does that. If the ticket's $500, it's going to be twice as many points as if the ticket's $250. And so it's super easy. That's kind of the fallback, where like you don't have to worry about all the other stuff. If there's not a great deal or it just happens to be a pretty cheap ticket to buy, that might be the type of program to consider.
Yeah. A couple other things to note is, as far as redeeming points, typically programs are going to allow you to have different options when you're booking on flight, whether it be economy class or business class or first class, and they're going to be different prices, as you would imagine. One thing to note, though, we talk about this all the time, is that not every flight has your first class, business class, premium economy, and economy class. So you do want to check out and actually make sure what your flight actually has in regards to the different classes of service. So as you can expect, those are going to be different amounts of points. The next thing is, and this can change the actual price in miles the most, is whether it's a saver or off-peak award versus what they'll call a standard award, which is really a rare and extremely inflated case. So most programs have essentially it broken down into, there's the cheaper prices in miles, and then there's the more expensive prices in miles, and there's usually a very big difference, often 2x plus. So you really want to be patient and use your miles at what the airlines will tell you is the best deal and the cheapest deal, which typically you can find as long as you have a diverse amount of points, a diverse type of points. And then finally is airlines can often price things different with their partners. So if you've got United miles and you fly in United, it might be a different amount of points required for that flight than if you fly in one of their Star Alliance partners like Lufthansa. An example being, in business class between the United States and Europe, if you're flying on an actual United flight with your United points, it's going to be 55,000 as of now. And if you fly in a partner, it's going to be 70,000 points. So these are just things to consider, some of the nuances in the programs that can affect the prices of flights.
All right, that's going to do it for this week's show. Again, if you want to check out all those lessons in detail, you can sign up for the course by visiting the show notes page for today, which is abroaders.com/159. And again, the coupon code is podcast.
Hey, Broaders, don't be shy. Hop over to the website and join our email list for exclusive travel hacking content. If you like what we're up to, the best way you can support the show is by leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes. Lastly, we would love to hear from you, so send your show feedback to Erik or AJ at abroaders.com. We will see you next week.